Okay, so hello everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the new dungeon weapons as well as the new dawning weapons. Now, a lot of you are here probably to see my thoughts on the rocket-assisted sidearm frame, so I'm going to be talking about that pretty soon. I mean, that's third on the list, but I'll also go over my brief thoughts on the new weapons, whether we're talking about the refreshed 2023 versions of the dawning perk pools, as well as these 4 weapons from the new dungeon. I hope you guys are enjoying the new dungeon so far. I actually got the chance to do my first full clear yesterday. I haven't been really motivated to play the game recently, plus I've been bogged down with finals and a couple other things, so my video output's a little bit reduced, but expect during winter break that to pick up steam again once I have some more time on my hands. So first, let's go over these first 4 weapons from the new dungeon. First, we have a strand precision frame bow. Now, precision frame bows are nice, but again, this is minus 15% because, sorry, not minus 15, it's minus 10 because it's a primary, but it is strand. And unfortunately, if we look at this thing, I mean, it is kind of unique in that it has explosive head in the 3rd column. You don't really typically see that on bows. It's also the only bow in this slot to get precision instrument, so I guess that's kind of interesting as well. But I would say that's unique and not necessarily useful because, you know, you're not really doing bow DPS most of the time. You're not doing sustained bow damage on a target. So really, I mean, maybe you're looking at explosive payload, successful warm-up or something like that here. Just, you know, it's all right, I suppose, but nothing too special. And let's also take the time to go over this new origin trait. Now, the theory behind this is that, you know, the eyes in the dungeon are constructs, so this kind of synergizes well in the dungeon itself. But outside of the dungeon, there's really not many places where you are destroying vehicles and constructs very often, especially not with a weapon like a bow. So unfortunately, you know, not great. You know, you're not really gonna, you know, make good use of this, unfortunately. And yeah, it's very, very niche, not a very good origin trait overall. If Destiny 2 had vehicles and constructs just all over the place all the time, it would probably be more useful, but unfortunately, that's not the case. So again, you know, Archer's Tempo, Precision Instruments, maybe Hatchling, you have Enlightened Action, Explosive Payload, Explosive Head, and Successful Warm-Up, you know, just kind of okay. Some unique perk combos, but nothing too crazy. Okay, moving on, we have Naeem's Lance. So this is a Strand 140 sniper, and unfortunately, they kind of pose this, it looks like, as a sort of utility sniper. Now, unfortunately, again, some unique perk combos, especially stuff like Hatchling in the 3rd column, the common theme between this dungeon's weapons are unique perk combos. Perks that are typically not in certain columns are in those columns, but not necessarily useful. So, I mean, here, I can't really see anything being too useful here. Precision Instrument is not very good on snipers, in my opinion, because you have to commit to them. High Ground, pretty bad. Slice is not really that relevant in PvE. Demo is fine on a sniper, but I prefer a higher per shot damage sniper than a rapid frame for a demolitionist. We have Deconstruct, which is like, yeah, I mean, maybe Discord Deconstruct for some sort of vehicle shredding sniper or something. I don't know. That just seems a bit silly. So yeah, again, not looking too crazy. Largely, you know, mediocre perks on this thing. Okay, moving on, we have Indebted Kindness. Now, I actually did some rocket-assisted frame sidearm damage testing because a lot of people were curious. And so let me get to those results in just one second. But first, let me go ahead and say this sidearm, the rumors are true. It does have very good total damage, but it does come with a caveat. And I do want to talk about that in just a second here. So first, let's briefly talk about this. This is a new sidearm frame. It shoots very fast-moving projectiles, and it's basically like a legendary Forerunner. That is the easiest way I can put it. It does similar per-shot damage to Forerunner, and you know, it has like a slower fire rate, but it has, you know, similar total bullets, you know, mag size, kind of like that. So there's some cool stuff on here. I mean, it has Volt Shot, which is nice. It has Surrounded if you want to use it for more like roam damage-oriented purposes. But the main thing with this sidearm, I guess it would be good with like anti-barrier sidearm this season as well. But the main thing with the sidearm, it's a new frame, right? So with a new frame comes new damage profile testing. Sorry for flashbanging you. But again, if we go to the single tab in my spreadsheet here, you'll see that it lands around here at the 75k mark. Now, Forerunner is just above that at 79k, so again, it's like a legendary Forerunner. Now, granted, this damage value, the reason why it's so close to Forerunner is because I'm assuming this thing has Surrounded, right? You're not always going to have Surrounded. Now, you're using a sidearm, so it's probably going to be common, but you're not always going to have Surrounded, right? So now the main thing that I want to draw your attention to here is let's look at this per shot value. It's 14k, right? It's 14k. And then let's go to something like a rapid fire sniper. So let me go to, for example, Irukandji, right? Irukandji's up here, and you'll see that it's around 15, 16k, right? So I want you to think about it like this. This sidearm does a similar amount of damage per shot compared to a rapid fire sniper. However, rapid-fire snipers shoot faster, and they have access to 4 times the charm, and they also don't have range fall-off. So if you want to use a weapon for damage purposes, a rapid-fire sniper is going to be better because you have 4 times the charm to extend your ammo. You have worse damage perks. You don't really have surrounded on snipers. I mean, it's kind of silly, obviously, right? But you have a faster fire rate, you have higher DPS, and you have more total damage because of FTTC. And you don't have range fall-off, right? So snipers are just generally better than this sidearm for damage. Now, where the sidearm I could see it maybe shining is in roam content. So, for example, anti-barrier sidearm, I would expect this thing to maybe 2 or even 1 tap, barrier champions, depending on the difficulty of whatever content you're facing. So that would be pretty nice. And this thing does have a lot of ammo, so it's very ammo efficient. And given the fact that it has no ammo regen perks, it still manages to pull pretty decent total damage values, right? I mean, these snipers are simulating the fact that you're shooting 4 times a charm repeatedly over and over. You're basically doubling the amount of ammo that you get, and they end up somewhere around 3 mil total damage. Whereas this sidearm, if I could just find it, this sidearm actually manages to get 2.9. Granted, that's what's surrounded, but 2.9 with no ammo regen perk. So think about that. That's pretty cool, right? It's pretty nice. And it doesn't feel too bad to use either. Okay, so this sidearm, I expect it to kind of like be like maybe like a trace rifle sort of equivalent, where it has a lower fire rate, so it's less appropriate for shooting objectives, but it's very good for picking off individual ads, at a relatively fast rate. So not too bad. Definitely kind of cool. I'm not not opposed to this weapon, but certainly doesn't really have a place in the damage meta. The only thing that I could see maybe being interesting with this thing is the fact that if you have Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves, remember, you can boost this thing's damage by 2 times. So if we simulate that, we give it a 2.8 times perk multiplier, right, which is, twice 1.4. This thing suddenly becomes, a lot stronger, right? You have 6 mil total damage, which, granted, you're probably not going to have the Mechaneer's Trick Sleeve perk up all the time, but the main thing to look at here is the damage numbers, right? 150k short-term DPS, that's quite high, right? That lands somewhere, up here, quite high, right? That's equivalent to like surrounded slug swapping or levy breath, right? So, I mean, granted, that's, you're not going to be able to do that all the time, but that is something to keep in mind with this sidearm. It does work with Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves, and it is legendary, right? So it basically just, you can do similar things with it and like Forerunner. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, I've talked enough about this sidearm. I hope you guys kind of get the point. I don't think it has much place in endgame content, but it is cool, and I don't hate it. So that's cool. That's nice. Okay, next up we have Dragoncult Sickle. Now this is, of course, a caster frame sword, the first caster frame sword Bungie has released in quite a long time, since this season. And yeah, I mean, it has perks, I guess, right? I'm curious to see what attrition orbs does on a sword, because swords don't have, like, as far as I'm concerned, attrition orbs is like a percentage of your mag. Requires like, it's based on your mag size, basically. It scales. So swords, I actually have no idea how many hits you're going to require to make orbs. Maybe it's 1 per hit, who knows. But the rest of the perks here, nothing too crazy. I mean, it has surrounded, I suppose, but yeah, I mean, demo is nice, I guess, but nothing here is really too crazy. I don't expect this thing to be very good. I'm gonna damage test caster frames whenever I get my hands on one of these, or like the ritual weapon this season, but besides that, nothing too crazy. So that's it for the dungeon weapons. Let's look at the dawning weapons next. So the dawning weapons, what do we have? The origin trait hasn't changed from last year, so it's still a good origin trait. Now, Stay Frosty. Stay Frosty was actually one of my recommendations for anti-barrier pulse rifles. Now, unfortunately, they did take adaptive munitions off of this thing, but they did give it enlightened action. So, ignoring the kind of a lot of the PvP perks here, we do have enlightened action. Enlightened action is kind of nice because Bungie, obviously tends to favor giving newer perks to their newer weapons, and we didn't really have a consistent reload perk. They like giving perpetual motion to a lot of weapons, which I didn't personally like. It's only 20 reload, whereas enlightened action, I believe, scales up to 50. Yeah, it scales up to 50 reload, which is really, really nice, and they gave it to Stay Frosty, so I'm a fan of that. Now, if enlightened action and under over is enough to 2-burst a barrier champion at GM content level, then I have no problem with this. This is actually probably going to be the best kinetic slot pulse rifle for anti-barrier stuns. But besides that, I mean, the rest of the perks here, nothing too crazy. I mean, you have Headstone, of course, because Headstone on stasis weapons, right? Everything else here, it kind of just looks like bleh, like whatever, right? So that's pretty cool. That's Stay Frosty. Let's move on to Cold Front. Now, Cold Front, this is last year's version. Again, the main problem here is no good reload perk. You have Perpetual Motion, which is okay, and then you have Subsistence, which doesn't scale into endgame content. Everything else is a PvP perk, or you have Stats for All, which I don't really like on primaries. Now, we move to Cold Front, and suddenly, this year, they give it Enlightened Action, which is really nice, and it also has Rewind rounds as well. So Enlightened Action, that's really nice. It has Frenzy, which I think it had Frenzy last year as well, right? Yeah, it has Frenzy. And, the rest of the perks here are not really great. I mean, Rampage, meh. One for All, meh on an SMG in my opinion. Rangefinder, not very good, obviously for PvE, and then Cascade Point, Situational, Attrition Orbs, okay, but again, mag dumping for just orbs, you know, when you could just be using Siphon Mods, kind of whatever. I mean, it does stack, but still not great. And then obviously Deconstruct. So Enlightened Action Frenzy, definitely going to be a nice feeling SMG, especially with the abysmal base stats that most aggressive frame SMGs have. That's definitely a plus in my books. Possibly enough to actually bring it over submission, but you know, I'll have to play both of them and see. Okay, next up we have Glacioclasm. Now Glacioclasm, they made it, I think they made it red this year. Interesting. Okay, well, they made it red. Let's go ahead and take a look at the perks. Now I believe not much has changed besides the fact that they've given this thing controlled burst. Now unfortunately, there are already better high impact frame archetype fusions which have controlled burst like Eremite and Loaded Question. So you know, this is not kind of like too little too late, I suppose. That being said, you know, it's not horrible. I mean, it still has Slide Shot Reservoir Burst, it still has Subsistence Reservoir Burst, the stuff that you look for on a PvE Glacioclasm, but I'm expecting this thing to be replaced with the reprise of the Garden Fusion next season or in the season after that. So, you know, maybe in the middle of the season, who knows. But besides that, you know, Glacioclasm hasn't really changed much for PvE, so we're going to move on. And we're going to talk about Albedo Wing. Now, this is the new aggressive glaive from the Dawning event, new this year. This is the second aggressive glaive in the game that is a legendary. We have the class glaive, and then we also have the Judgment of Kel'Grath. So this thing, I mean, I haven't actually seen this thing's perks, so what do we got on this thing? I mean, it has close to melee. They give it beacon rounds, which is interesting. I mean, not particularly useful in PvE. Now, okay, so we have Grave Robber close to melee. That's actually very nice. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think Kel'Grath actually has Grave Robber, so this would be the best glaive in the game for doing roam glaive content on something like Worm Gods. So that's actually pretty nice. Big fan of that. And of course, if the kills from the melee itself trigger Dawning gifts, that's kind of nice actually, because, you know, gives you health regen, restores 20 HP, good for melee builds. So pretty cool. I'm looking at the other perks here. I mean, it does have demo. I always like demo on weapons that get the higher tier of grenade chunking, so that's cool. Everything else here is not looking like too crazy though, you know. Yeah, nothing crazy. So it's really, we're just looking at Grave Robber and close to melee. And maybe if you melee something repeatedly, you can get infinite orbs or something. Maybe that's some sort of tech in the future. But I'm really looking at Grave Robber close to melee. That does look pretty nice. Okay, moving on, we have Avalanche. So Avalanche, compared to last year, I mean, what did they do to it? It looks like they didn't do too much. Yeah, for PvE, it only looks like they gave it rewind rounds. I don't see anything else that is particularly interesting besides that. Yeah, not much. So yeah, I mean, basically you're just going to be looking at like auto incandescent or sub incandescent, maybe rewind rounds incandescent if you're a fan of that. Everything else here is largely the same as last year. Still worse than Unwavering Duty. Just okay. Yeah, just a decent machine gun. Hopefully they fix the reserve thing though, and it doesn't have bugged less reserves than other machine guns. Okay, moving on, we have Zephyr. So Zephyr is of course the Cold Steel Sword. I'm curious to see what changes they've kind of made to this thing. As far as I can tell, not much. I mean, they gave it attrition orbs. They give it adaptive munitions for some reason. Yeah, if you ever need, I don't know, anti-barrier sword. I don't think you're using this thing to break non-match shields. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, not looking too crazy. Yeah, not much to look at here really. So we're really just looking at Cold Steel again. I mean, none of the other perks here are particularly interesting. I don't think they've changed anything really in the first column that's of note. So yeah, that's basically it. That is all of the new weapons this season that I haven't talked about yet. So Dawning plus dungeon weapons. I hope that satisfies your fancy. Those of you who were asking for my opinions on this, I have added this to the spreadsheet. In fact, it is in the single tab as well as in the weapons tab. Also, check out the new values section. I've split it into weapons and abilities. This should be much easier to navigate now. I was having a lot of trouble myself, control Fing, especially given that I named the weapons after, I named the cells, the rows after individual weapons rather than the frame and type of weapon that they are. I have now fixed that, unless it's an exotic, obviously. So that's very, very helpful. You can kind of just look sword, lightweight frame, sword, bequest, sword, aggressive frame, right? So that's pretty nice, pretty happy about that. And then abilities are in their own tab. A lot of melee is missing right now, but we're going to fix that in the near future, hopefully. So yeah, hopefully that goes over well. I think that's it. Thanks for watching. We are going to come out with some more videos in the near future. And yeah, I'll see you guys around.